Vanity Fair, 1994, Trump family values. Let's read it. First of all, this magazine, can you even? Oh, here we are. Here's the page. Trump family values. Once on the brink of losing his gaudy empire, Donald Trump is about to take his casinos public in a sale that he figures will net him billions. Joining him in his comeback are new bride Marla Maples and baby daughter Tiffany. For Trump, getting to the altar was as difficult as any of his financial maneuvers. With his parents telling him to go back to Ivana and Marla setting deadlines, only Marla's mother kept the course of love running smooth. Edward Klein joins the re-emerging mogul as he prepares for the deals of his life. Ivana still loves you, Donald Trump's mother was telling him. I know, said Trump. I talk to her all the time, at least a couple of times a week. Ivana can't feel great about my baby with Marla. She can't be thinking, wow, this is wonderful. She'd take you back, his mother said. Mom, I'm going to have to make a decision about Marla, he said. She stuck by me through the worst. She's been loyal. The obvious decision is to marry her. Trump was having Sunday brunch with his parents in the palm court of the plaza, the landmark Fifth Avenue hotel he had bought for $407 million in 1988 and had let his wife, Ivana, restore and run until Marla Maples came along. He did not like talking about marriage. In fact, he referred to it as the big M word. And he surely wasn't going to tell his mother and father about the bruising negotiations he had had with Marla over a prenuptial agreement. But if there was going to be a wedding, and it looked increasingly as if there would be, he wanted his parents in his corner. There's a level of brutality in boxing, Trump was fond of saying when describing his recent travails as a lapsed billionaire and the father of an out of wedlock child. It's hard to take 300 punches in the face and come back for another round. I remember hearing a champ after a fight say to the cameras, I want to thank the Lord, my Savior, who gave me the ability to beat the shit out of my opponent. Trump's father had always been there for him. Donald learned how to be tough from his father, who made the first Trump million collecting apartment rents in the outer boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens. In one of Donald's darkest hours, when Trump's castle in Atlantic City was on the verge of defaulting on its interest payment to junk bondholders, Fred Trump had purchased $3.5 million worth of gambling chips as an instant loan to his son. When the shit hit the fan, Donald Trump recalled, when this great genius Donald was getting stories that it was all over, my father would tell people, go do yourself a favor, go to the bookie and put a lot of money on Donald's head. His mother had been there for him too, and many people thought that she had even more influence over Donald than his father. She would call me up and say, Darling, are you all right? He said, Why don't you come over for a meal? Trump might describe other women as ballbusters, but of Mary Trump, his 80-year-old Scottish mother, he said, I trust her 100%. The trouble was that his parents had old-fashioned middle-class values, and they had never been crazy about Marla, the other woman, who was living with baby Tiffany Ariana Trump, in Mar-a-Lago, the Palm Beach mansion Trump had snatched up in 1985 at the bargain price of $10 million dollars from the estate of Marjorie Merriweather Post. At age 89, Fred Trump was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, but in his lucid moments, he would say that Donald should stay with Ivana, the mother of their three children, Donnie, 16, Ivanka, 12, and Eric, 10, and that if Donald wanted Marla as a mistress, he should keep her on the QT. Even Mary Trump, who never criticized Donald and had looked absence at his soap opera adventures since the famous New Year's Eve day's confrontation 4 years earlier between Ivana and Marla on the ski slopes of Aspen. I don't know Marla well, Mary Trump said in her soft brogue. I heard that she told Blaine, Donald's sister-in-law, this is it. Either Donald marries me or I take my child. I will not have my child living here without a father at Christmas. This is Marla, very upset. It was hard for Trump to explain to his parents that as much as he wanted to reward Marla for her loyalty by making her an honest woman, it was not his sole motive for marriage. Trump had ambitious plans to offer stock in his gambling casinos to the public in early 1994, and it was essential to the success of this high-stakes venture that he remove the moral stigma of being viewed as an unfaithful husband and the father of an illegitimate child. Until the time of the stock offering, every decision about his personal life had to enhance his next big project, the comeback. If he left it up to Marla, they would probably have one of those new age wedding ceremonies on the beach with Dr. Arthur Caliandro, their minister from Manhattan's Marble Collegiate Church, officiating and a few close friends getting sand in their shoes. At least that's what Marla said she wanted, though Trump couldn't help but wonder if her aspirations for a big day were really as modest as that. Anyway, modesty wasn't exactly the Trump style. Some people like to pigeonhole Trump as a shameless self promoter, a hopeless narcissist, a modern Barnum, but his real talent, in his view, was his ability to visualize things on a large scale, grander than anyone else, and then, through creative financing, make them happen. When he thought about marrying Marla, he envisioned thousands of guests in black tie and gowns filling the majestic grand ballroom of the plaza. Michael Jackson would come out of hiding just to attend his friend's wedding. Whitney Houston would sing. Every major Hollywood figure would be there. All the studio heads and all the stars, including Eddie Murphy, another personal friend. He would have celebrities from the worlds of business and fashion and society, and even Howard Stern. He'd hire Elizabeth Taylor's press agent, Chen Sam, to handle the event, and she would ensure that it was covered by the world press. It would be huge. It would be a monster. Controlled bedlam. You'd have people breaking down police barricades. It would be the wedding of the year, the decade, maybe the century. But time was running out. There was less than 3 weeks to go on Marla's Christmas Day ultimatum. And here was his father, sitting across the table from him, looking glum and vacant when his son mentioned her name. And here was his mother, making him listen to how much Ivana still loved him and raising those baby trap objections against Marla. It made him wonder. His parents weren't the only ones who thought he shouldn't rush into marrying Marla. On the contrary, a lot of people believed that someday he and Ivana would actually get back together. Who knew? Maybe they would. Anyway, he had this sinking feeling that he was losing control, repeating the same old mistakes, and there seemed to be nothing he could do about it. Mom, he said, what should I do? The next evening, Trump's stretch limo picked me up at my apartment, then swung down Fifth Avenue and stopped in front of the pink marble entrance of Trump Tower. Trump was scheduled to make a brief appearance in Brooklyn, and after that, he was off to a black tie dinner at the Waldorf Astoria, where a high-powered group of public figures called the Forum Club, founded by his pal limousine tycoon Bill Fugazi, was to honor Trump as Humanitarian of the Year. Can you believe it? Trump said as he slipped into the seat next to mine and patted me on the knee. Humanitarian of the Year? Now that's something different for the Trumpster. The last time we had been together was back in the early 80s when I was the editor-in-chief of the New York Times Magazine, and he had invited me to Trump Tower with the aim of interesting me in assigning a story with the pharaonic reservations he was making to his vast triplex apartment, which consisted of more than 50 rooms, including an 80-foot-long living room with a waterfall. No story had appeared at that time, and I wasn't sure the world needed one now, but what was there left to say about Donald Trump? Hadn't he lost control of everything? His yacht, his plane, his airline, his casinos, his hotel, his apartment buildings, his credit with the banks, his credibility with the press? Wasn't he like those tarnished icons of the garish 1980s, Michael Milken and Ivan Boesky history? Had he learned anything from his collapse and catastrophe, or was he still essentially an alienated figure, a man at war against himself? As nasty as the press can be, he told me on the way over the bridge to Brooklyn, they know that once they've cut you down, the best story is to build you back up again. Piece by piece, deal by deal, a beautiful story is starting to emerge about me. He handed me a folder containing his personal financial statement, which had been prepared by the accounting firm of Spar, Locker, and Sperber. It showed that as of September 1993, Trump had assets of $139,326,000 in cash and cash equivalents. Someone who was familiar with the details of his finances had told me that those figures were actually on the conservative side. and that Trump kept more than $6 million in his personal checking accounts alone. That didn't mean, however, that Trump could just reach in and grab all that money for his private use. He had huge financial responsibilities. In the halogen light of the limo, I tried to decipher that side of the statement, but Trump had already launched into a stream of consciousness speech that sounded amazingly like Al Pacino's monologue about selling real estate in the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. When you have 15 years and haven't had a miss, and then everything crashes, the entire world crashes, you learn a lot about yourself. I want people to be skeptical of me, of my real net worth. Otherwise, how can I expect them to compromise with me and allow me to do what I want to do? The one thing I've learned through this, I had to go back to work. I had been in Europe fucking every model in the world. My life was wild. I started hiring these fucking morons to run my casinos, all those geniuses from Wharton and Harvard, but they did not have the touch. All of a sudden, a human trait, I wasn't watching the business. I had to go back to work. He went on describing his intimidable fashion, nothing less than the most spectacular financial roller coaster of modern times, his crash and his comeback. In 1989, when Trump was at his peak, Forbes magazine estimated that he had a net worth of $1.7 billion. It was the height of the real estate boom, a time when the Japanese were coming into New York City and paying any price for those trophy buildings. He owned 2 casinos in Atlantic City, the Castle and the Plaza, and he had a third one, the Taj Mahal, under construction. He had bought the Eastern Shuttle, overpaid for the Plaza Hotel, and started work on Trump Palace, his Third Avenue condominium. His first 2 books, The Art of the Deal and Surviving at the Top, both published in hardcover by Random House, sold a combined total of well over 1 million copies. But within a matter of months, the real estate market collapsed and Trump was underwater. His personal liabilities alone, debts guaranteed with his signature, were approaching $1 billion. He had to hand over the shuttle to Citicorp. He had to turn back his 282-foot yacht, the Trump Princess, to the Boston company. He had to give up the Trump Palm Beaches condo to Marine Midland. I had to put my ego aside for a while, he told me. The smart thing I did was go into a big cash flow business, casinos. In 1990, I went in early and said to the banks, I want to work a deal. I want to restructure my loans. I want $65 million in new money. They put up $56 million. I bet the ranch. I said, I'm going to give you sign-offs. I'm going to say I need this capital. I'm going back to work. Trump persuaded the banks to refinance his debt, and he promised them that the mounting cash flow from his casinos would cover the interest and eventually repay the principal. The embarrassed bankers agreed. They had little choice but to give him the breathing space he asked for. The lowest point was a day sometime in the middle of 1991 when the shit hit the fan, he said. Both the Times and the Wall Street Journal did front page articles saying I'd never come back. I wanted, perhaps stupidly, to get out of my marriage. I had a prenup with Ivana, $10 million and a couple of houses. At first, Ivana's lawyers against me was $2 billion. Her lawyers would have settled for $150 million. At one point, I was ready to hand her a check for $50 million, and they turned it down cold. Then I had these horrible articles about me, and that day I get a call from Ivana. I want my money. I want my money now. I will take the $10 million. Literally like bees. The only reason she took 10 was because she wanted to make sure there was something there. We had arrived at Kings Highway in Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, the site of 1991 black rampage against the Hasidic community, which ultimately cost Mayor David Dinkins, who failed to act promptly, thousands of Jewish votes and his job. Matt Calamari, Trump's chief bodyguard, opened the door and his boss ducked out. The street was lit bright as day, and there wasn't a black person in sight. The entire block had been turned into a deserted no man's land by a large contingent of high-ranking police officers who were there to make sure that that night's event went off smoothly. The tall, blonde Trump bounded up the stairs of the Alexandria Catering Hall and waded into the room full of bearded, black-coated Hasidim who represent the most cohesive political bloc in New York City and who had gathered for a fundraiser for Noach Deer, a New York City councilman. Deere had helped Trump on a number of zoning issues, and although Trump had a phobia about germs and hated physical contact, he dutifully shook the hand of every rabbi and community leader in the room. An hour later, we were heading back to the city, as Manhattan is always referred to by those who, like Trump, grew up in the outer boroughs. He told me how, more than 20 years earlier, Louis Rudin, the scion of one of New York's most prominent real estate families, had given him the idea of leaving the small-time world of Brooklyn and Queens and making his fortune in the city. Then his mind turned to the future, and he was once again the salesman in full cry. This has been the best year of my life, he said. The Taj, the Plaza, and the Castle, his Atlantic City casinos, will spin off gross operating profits of $250 million, enabling me to pay down my debt and recapture 100% equity in all three casinos. The Plaza Hotel will show a profit after interest payments of $15 million. The condominiums at Trump Palace have sold out. I've got zoning approval to start building on the West Side Yards. And Philip Johnson is designing the first floor buildings. That's 75 acres of land on the Hudson River between 59th and 72nd. I don't pay Ivana a penny of alimony anymore. She's moving out of the Trump Tower triplex in January, and I'm moving back in. I'm no longer on a $400,000 a month living allowance from the banks. I'm working on my third book, The Art of the Comeback, although I haven't chosen a publisher yet. I bought the land under the Empire State Building from a very wealthy Japanese man. I'm buying an L-1011. That's a wide body jet that sits 350 people 10 across. How much of this was true and how much of this was Trumpster hyperbole? I asked bankers, Wall Street executives, and businessmen who knew the inside story of Trump's finances, and a great deal of what he told me checked out. The bottom line was that Donald Trump had reduced his personal debts from $975 million to $150 million, and that if all went according to plan, he would be totally free of personal debt after he took his casinos public. When we entered the lobby of the Waldorf Astoria, Trump looked around as though he were appraising the property. He muttered, "Someday, someday." We rode the elevator to the Starlight Roof, where he was one of the night's honorees at the Forum Club. Mayor Dinkins was sitting in the dais. So were Mayor-elect Rudolph Giuliani, Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly, Trump's old friend Louis Rudin, and a host of other New York City luminaries. "Watch this," said Trump, about to make his entrance. "Just watch what happens." As he squeezed between the crowded tables in the direction of the dais, the room was suddenly electrified. Heads turned and people stood to get a better look at him. Men elbowed one another out of the way in order to get near him. A woman in a tight-fitting cocktail dress broke away from her husband and demanded, almost hysterically, to have her photograph taken with Trump. She seemed on the verge of both laughter and tears. The pupils of her eyes were dilated. Trump put his arms around her shoulder and peered into the camera. His eyes matched hers. They had that same narcotized look. The next day, Trump flew off to Gary, Indiana for a press conference and a meeting with the city council on his proposal to build a huge floating casino and hotel complex on a 121-acre site there leased from the USX Corporation. He was accompanied by Nick Ribis, the highly regarded chief executive officer of the Trump Organization, who had spent nearly $1 million on architects, lawyers, lobbyists, and public relations consultants in an effort to convince the city fathers of Gary, a Sudi, down at the hill steel toe town 25 miles southeast of Chicago, that their financial salvation rested with Donald Trump rather than with half a dozen other gambling suitors. Trump knew that the comeback depended in large part on his plan to sell stock in his casinos. But in order for the public offering to be the wild success he hoped it would be, he had to demonstrate the ability to diversify to jurisdictions outside of Atlantic City. It wasn't that the competition from gambling on nearby Indian reservations had hurt Atlantic City, despite some dire predictions. That had not happened. But the pressure was on Trump to broaden his base and show growth. He had already acquired a site for a riverboat casino in Gulfport, Mississippi, and in addition to Gary, he had his eye on Las Vegas, New Orleans, and St. Louis. Things seemed to go well in Gary, and Trump was in an ebullient mood as his plane headed home. If you like beautiful boats and beautiful homes and beautiful planes, just because it's the 90s, are you supposed to say, oh, excuse me, I don't like these things anymore? Bullshit. And of course, I could add women to the category, but I won't. The extent of Trump's rehabilitation could be measured by the fact that back in New York, a number of investment bankers were betting on the value of his marquee name to make him a winner on Wall Street, where gaming stocks were hot. During 1993, there had been more than 20 initial public offerings, or IPOs, in the gaming industry, and Wall Street was convinced that casino gambling, confined until now to a relatively few widely spread locations, was capturing the hearts and minds of America. That's actually fucking crazy. Indeed, legalized gambling was a $30 billion a year business, twice as big as movies and television combined. Donald has defied the law of gravity, said Marvin Rothman, a leading stock analyst and once one of Trump's harshest critics, who had been fired by his firm back in 1990 after he'd angered Trump by telling a reporter that Trump's Taj Mahal was on the verge of financial disaster. He went to his bankers and said, look, who do you want to run this business? I'm licensed and I can turn this thing around. Can you? Really? Are you licensed? Do you have anyone else run this business? If he wasn't in a regulated business, anyone could have assumed control, but in New Jersey, it can cost more than a year and $1 million to get licensed. Plus the fact that they want you to submit all your canceled checks for 10 years, and they do a background check where they find out the color of your underwear. I mean, if Donald Trump is not back, I'm missing something big, said one of his investment bankers. You can write the guy down, short him, but in reality, there is something there, a substance that the average guy cannot make happen. The conceptual problem or opportunity facing Trump is, can he issue the right amount of equity before his window of opportunity is slammed shut, said James Grant, whose highly regarded bi-monthly Grant's interest rate observer had been the first to blow the whistle on Trump back in 1987. Grant's interest rate observer had been the first to blow the whistle on Trump back in 1987 when it predicted his bankruptcy. Nothing this frothy in the stock market has lasted very long. I guess if Trump sells stock, as he tells me on the phone he might do, he could walk away free and clear with that charming smirk on his face. Wilbur L. Ross Jr., senior managing director of Rothschild Inc. and the investment banker who had helped the bondholders in the Taj Mahal restructuring, added, I think he is the world's greatest promoter and PR person. In Atlantic City, you're selling them entertainment, pageantry, wishful thinking, a dream. So having someone like Trump lends itself to that. He has captured the public imagination and turned it into a resource for himself. People may joke he's always promoting himself, but he's figured out a way to make it more than an ego trip. He's turned it into money. For my benefit, Trump calculating what he would be worth after he took his casinos public. If the IPO goes to $4 billion and I have $1 billion worth of debt, then I'll be worth $3 billion, and we're not even talking about my New York real estate. But even investment bankers who were eager to do business with Trump believed that his figures were inflated. I think, said one, if you look at what the average casino value is on the market today, the going valuation range, you come out to about $2 billion for Trump's company, not $4 billion. However, what is the added value of the Trump name? It's a brand name, and it really has some value. He loves the word billions because he hasn't learned the word trillions yet. If you say, hey, Donald, you may not get this. It's hearsay. You want my prediction? Said another expert who was close to the situation. He will get to the public marketplace. He'll sell half to the public and he'll keep half for himself. It's the largest casino company in the world, and before debt, it will be worth over $2 billion when all is said and done, as much as $500 million to $750 million. I've got to make a decision about Marla, Trump told me again and again and again over the course of the next couple of days. We have a baby. We have a good relationship. It's a little unfair to her, but I love the freedom. Although he cranked up the suspense at every opportunity, I suspected that Donald had already made up his mind, but needed to feel that he had total control over when and how the information would be released. When Donald started talking about divorcing Ivana, he used to call people at night, said one of his friends. His survey is a way of notifying the world. So a month before his wedding to Marla, he comes to me and says, I don't know if I should. And I immediately knew he was going to marry her. On December 9th, he attended a meeting of the Riverside South Planning Corporation, which consisted of representatives of environmental and other influential liberal groups that Trump had persuaded to work with him on the developing West Side yards. It was a love fest. Lambs lying down with a lion. Then he returned to his office and took one giant step toward the altar. He hired Chen Sam, the Egyptian-born, British-educated physician who has handled Elizabeth Taylor's PR for 21 years. A doctor did Elizabeth Taylor's PR. That's fucking crazy. But he didn't tell her whether he was ready to marry Marla. All Chen Sam knew for sure was that her office would be working on Donald's future projects. The next day, Trump put out the story himself. Donald and Marla were getting married. The news was splashed all over TV. The phones in the Trump Tower began ringing off the hook. That night, we hopped down to Atlantic City on his Super Puma helicopter for a tour of his casinos. Trump recalled how his 3 top casino executives had lost their lives in a helicopter crash in October 1989, a tragedy from which many people dated the beginning of his financial crash. The memory triggered dark thoughts, and Trump said, "It's all bullshit. You do all this, and then you kick the bucket, and then your kids start fighting over money. Tiffany fights with Ivanka, and Ivana comes back and says, it was me he really loved all the time. And so what is this all about?" This disquisition on death led him to the subject of AIDS. "Being single out there is a little bit scary, to put it mildly," he said. "It's like being in Vietnam in the forest and knowing there are guns pointing at your head." This is a comparison to AIDS in 1994. "It's like being in Vietnam in the forest and knowing there are guns pointed at your head. I long for the 70s to the extent that it was a different time. Now, if you get something, they tell you not only are you going to die, but that you're going to die over 10 years. Your skin is going to rot and fall off, and you're going to die a horrible death. Despite all that's been said about me, I'm actually a one-woman man." As much as he talks about sleeping around with models, said someone who had known him well for many years, Donald has a deathly fear of disease, germs, AIDS. "I don't see him sleeping around at all. My theory is he never slept with any of those models. I don't believe he had sex with any of those women in the past 6 or 7 years except for Marla." And Marla has it all figured out. After Atlantic City, we boarded a rented Gulfstream for the flight to Mar-a-Lago. Trump began reminiscing about one of his well-publicized breakups with Marla. "She was very hurt," he said. "Michael Bolton calls Marla and says, 'Marla, I'd like to take you out.' And he falls madly in love with her. Now, I say to myself, wait a minute, I don't like this. Michael Bolton, he's got the #1 fucking album in the world, Time, Love, and Tenderness. And what does that do to a guy like me, a competitive guy? It's like an affirmation that the girl has to be great because the #1 singer has fallen for her. There's nothing wrong with what she's doing. I left her. Not only that, I left her like a dog." Woof. So what happens is, I say, "What the fuck is going on?" I do a Trump number on her, all enveloping. I call her. She says, "How could you have left me the way you did?" She decides to go to Hawaii with me instead of Europe with Michael Bolton. In Maui, this guy finds out where we are and he starts sending flowers, yellow roses with a note. "I've got Georgia on my mind. Love, Michael." She's torn. I've left her twice, but she drops him and comes back to me. Marla Maples was stretched out in a black one-piece bathing suit on a chaise lounge by the pool at Mar-a-Lago. Her skin was perfect and her body was athletically taut. It was hard to believe that, less than 2 months before that, this 30-year-old 5'8" former beauty queen model and showgirl had been pregnant and weighed around 151 pounds. She was already back down to 127 and was shooting for 125 by December 13th, just a week before her wedding, when she would go for the first fitting of her white wedding dress, which was being designed by Carolina Herrera. She said she ate a lot of green vegetables, almonds, sesame seeds, and fruits. The motto should be "nothing in excess," she told me in all seriousness. She slipped a strap off her shoulder and guided Tiffany to her left nipple. "I was in labor for 10 hours, she said. I created a beautiful environment in the hospital. I had candles, a picture of me and Donald. I had my new age music playing, aromatherapy, which is supposed to be very calming. My mother was there, Donald was there, my good friend Janie Elder, my manager's fiance, Mika Dawson, a Native American Indian. Aiko, who calls herself a nurturer and who specializes in prenatal care and birthing, and who gives me a massage and prays with you. There were a lot of times I yelled, "Pray for me now," and Donald was going to the doctor. "Can you give her something?" Because he couldn't stand me in the pain, and me telling Janie, "Don't you dare allow him to give me anything." Marla's mother, Anne Ogletree, a 54-year-old Southern beauty, appeared at the poolside in a bathing suit and mules and appeared to take Tiffany away for a nap. Anne was serving as nanny for the 118-room mansion, which was designed for Marjorie Merriweather Post in the 1920s by set designer Joseph Urban, and which featured a dining room that seated 50, a drawing room with a replica of a gold leaf ceiling in the Accademia in Venice, 58 rooms, 33 bathrooms, 3 bomb shelters, a theater, and a golf course. This is Mar-a-Lago. Trump had received permission from the Palm Beach Town Council to turn to Mar-a-Lago into a private club. In the meantime, he and Marla were camped out amid all the splendor in the bedroom once occupied by E.F. Hutton, Marjorie Merriweather Post's second husband, which Donald and Marla had decorated with wall-to-wall off-white carpeting, floral Roman shades, and rattan furniture. When Donald was not outside hitting golf balls on the lawn or supervising renovations on the house, he spent his time in the bedroom with Marla and the baby. They put Tiffany between them on the big double bed, ate from plates delivered by the butler, and watched a football game on television. They lived more like an average husband and wife in the Mar-a-Lago than they did in New York City, where Marla and her own apartment in Trump Park, and Donald had his 3-bedroom in Trump Tower, 2 floors below the triplex that Ivana and their children had been occupying since the split. Although he spent an occasional night at Marla's place, he was often at home. It soon became apparent that Anne Ogletree served another important function in this stormy household. For more than 6 years, Donald and her daughter had a relationship marked by jealous temper tantrums and frequent breakups. They might love each other, but they enjoyed torturing each other too. Donald complained that Marla did not show him sufficient appreciation for what he had done for her, making her a celebrity and giving her the good life. Every time Donald dumped Marla, he went off to have his picture taken with some model. People thought he had the upper hand, but the truth, it turned out, was far more complicated than that. Marla knew how to push Donald's buttons. She taunted him in public for being overweight. She played with the hair on his head, lifting it up and exposing his scalp, poking fun at his efforts to hide his hair loss. She derided his sexual prowess in front of his friends and associates. During the time she was tucked away as Donald's secret mistress in Atlantic City, Marla had managed to turn him against everybody, isolating him from his own casino executives and creating havoc. She had driven Donald crazy by showing him all her personal diaries except one missing volume, which Donald suspected had been stolen, along with some nudes of Marla by Chuck Jones, Marla's former press agent, whom she was suing for allegedly burglarizing her apartment and stealing 71 pairs of her shoes and boots. "I don't care about her diary or her nude photos," Chuck Jones told me. "I have a doctor who I'm dealing with on this allegation of foot fetishes. I mean, I offered Marla a chance to talk to my psychiatrist. This is something I tried to deal with from the start. It is not a perversion, not a foot fetish. It's something else, something I cannot understand yet. I'm working on it with this doctor on a constant basis. We haven't really resolved any of those psychological issues." I don't know what the fuck that's talking about. Do you? "Women have an effect on Donald like nothing I've ever seen," said a friend. "Ivana did the same thing to him that Marla did. Under Ivana, people didn't pay their bills and the plaza was a disaster. I'm very concerned that things are going to change dramatically in his business life after he marries her. What do you think? Marla won't want to run things?" Trump must have sensed that things would spin out of control again, and it was his deep reluctance to get married that caused the greatest acrimony between him and Marla. "I've always been very sensitive to what others may think," said Marla. "So my greatest fear was created with the picture that was drawn of me in the media. I felt very misunderstood. I was extremely judged, and I had judged others in the same position." Arthur Caliandro and I prayed together over the telephone. As Christmas approached, I was feeling bad because we weren't married, and I was going back to Georgia to visit my family. I felt it was now or never. If we didn't make this commitment now before the holidays, it would never happen. I didn't see any reason to wait, and I didn't see why he should wait. I couldn't have stayed in the relationship because I would have doubted how strong his love is. If he had not gone that extra step, I would have definitely walked out. Once again, the ever-present Anne Ogletree held them together, constantly phoning Donald to smooth things over, constantly making sure that Marla stayed with the program, whose sole purpose was to get Donald to marry her. Anne counseled Marla on the subject of a prenuptial agreement, which Marla tearfully refused to sign because, among other things, it would effectively robbed her of all power and gagged her from ever revealing any of Donald's personal or financial secrets. A prenuptial is a horrible document, Donald admitted, because it says, when we get divorced, this is the way we'll split things up. And when you're a believer in positive thinking, it isn't good, but it's a modern-day necessity. Trump had used all his considerable powers of persuasion, and in late November, Marla had caved, agreed to sign the prenup. But according to someone close to the negotiations, Marla wanted $25 million in the event of a divorce. Though no one outside of the two parties and their respective lawyers had presumably seen the document, it was eventually filed with the New Jersey Casino Control Commission, and Trump proudly confided to people close to him that he had negotiated Marla down to $1 million. Marla did not want anyone to know that she had signed the prenup, and when she learned that Donald had told me about it, she phoned me. This was the big battle all along, she said. But there's a lot of factors involved here. We basically came to an agreement for the first few years we would agree on something and then tear it up. So that way, I feel that we have what he needs right now for his business, and then in 5 years, I have what I need for a true marriage. This is so insane to me. But those familiar with prenup agreements thought that Marla might have missed the point. She thinks it's wonderful because after a few years, the agreement's going to expire, said one expert. But let me tell you, it will either be extended after the 5 years or Trump is out of there. 5 years made her happy. She thinks after 5 years, they will be free to be totally in love. On the eve of his wedding, Trump sent a dozen red roses to Ivana. Despite their divorce 2 years ago, he had in effect kept her on the string. He spoke to her on the phone, often with the excuse of discussing their children. Ivanka and Eric were enrolled in private schools in Manhattan, while Donnie, the eldest, was away at boarding school in Pennsylvania. When home, the children often took the Trump Tower elevator down from the triplex to their father's apartment. They were also free to barge into his office during meetings. It was clear to all that Trump loved his children and that he was good with them, although he did not especially care to deal with their problems. The children, for their part, loved their father, and they put a lot of pressure on him not to marry Marla. It seemed fitting that as Donald prepared to marry Marla, Ivana was back on the ski slopes of Aspen, where it had all begun. I stay at Little Nell Hotel, Marvin Davis Hotel, at bottom of mountain, with Barbara Davis and all the kids, Ivana told me. I ski better than when I was a racer. I go in February with my children in Switzerland at a club, Corviglia, one of the most exclusive clubs in the world, and I race there. I race 1 year, and second year, I don't. Reason is because I always win. Trump was exultant that the New York Times, which had given him such a hard time when he was down and out, had run a front page story replete with a huge photo of his visit with Marla to City Hall to pick up their marriage license. He had given Entertainment Tonight exclusive video rights to the wedding rehearsal. At San Chem's suggestion, he would be selling family wedding photos to magazines and newspapers all over the world and donating that money to charity. But all the preparations were not going according to plan. He was deeply concerned about the turnout for the next day's ceremony. His staff had started phoning people only 8 days before. There had been no time for printed invitations, and now, with so many people away for the holidays, it had become abundantly clear that most of the celebrities he had been counting on were not going to show up. There would be no Eddie Murphy, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Liza Minnelli, no supermodels or Hollywood moguls. In fact, it looked as though there would be more photographers than familiar faces. There wouldn't be any Trump kids either, because Ivana, who was vacationing with her beau, Riccardo Musicelli, an Italian businessman, was not letting Donnie, Ivanka, or Eric attend the wedding. Trump had decided to spend his last night as a single man, not at a bachelor party in the flesh pots of the city, but in rural New Jersey, where a Christmas celebration was being given at the home of Nick Rebus, his CEO for people associated with the Trump organization. Trump nibbled from the buffet and then went into the study and presented himself to Carol Schuler, a professional tarot card reader who had been hired for the evening. How's this marriage going to work out? I kibitzed on the sideline. Is it okay with you if I answer? The reader asked Trump. I guess so, he says nervously. Schuler threw the card on the table and said, it shows imbalance in the relationship. You need to compromise more. Trump was clearly not pleased. The tarot reader threw another card. This shows it's important to include each other in decisions, she said. She's very protective. She's there when you need her. Will I have children? Trump asks with genuine curiosity. Yes, and the next one is going to be a boy. And this changes your entire life. Will business continue to do well? This is another question that isn't black and white, she said, considering a new card. I watched as Trump seemed to sink under the weight of her words. There is growth, but slower than you'd like it to be. You have some difficult cards here. Don't take on more than you can handle. On the way home, I asked Trump if he felt that Marla had trapped him into marriage by having Tiffany. We've been together for 6 years, he replied. If she wanted to do that, get me by getting pregnant, she could have done it a lot sooner. We had just gotten back together and she wasn't using the pill and I knew it. I don't feel as though I was trapped. Trapped would have been to not tell me she wasn't on the pill. I'm not the kind of guy who has babies out of wedlock and doesn't get married and give the baby a name. And for me, I'm not a believer in abortion. I then asked him what he had learned from his brush with financial death and the painful experience of being shunned by the world while he was down. I have friends who can have war with someone and then go back and be best friends. I can't be that way. You have to remember who the loyal ones were and who were not. And if you don't, you're a total schmuck. And if I have a chance to hurt these people who were not loyal to me, I will. Call that vindictive. Call it what you will. People who wouldn't talk to me 3 years ago now call up and they want to kiss my ass. I tell my secretary, Rona, call them back and say, Mr. Trump told me to tell you, fuck you. And then hang up. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Okay, guys, thanks for joining me. There are 2 parts of this. And yes, I did throw that on the ground, and that is wild. There are 2 parts that are like excerpts of the article that I want you guys to see. So I'll like I'll like include my Substack like this, and oh gosh, like their wedding number breakdown. And wait, this is the wedding number breakdown of like all the money they spent. I'll include that in my my Substack, and then I'm also going to include the timeline of Donald and Marla, because it's all that they include all of like the politics of each season of each year for 5 years. So it's like George Bush, Donald Trump in the same sentence, same paragraph, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, all this shit. So anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to my Substack, and we'll see ya.